Now, DC has made multiple Captain America parodies. There's been Agent Liberty, Commander Steel, Captain Steel, Citizen Steel. But the one we're talking about today is General Glory, which there's actually been 2 of. But one had actually only appeared 4 times before being killed off. So instead we're talking about the first General Glory, since he was an actual character rather than an occasional cameo before dying. Now, while yes, he is technically a quote-unquote ripoff, he's actually intended to be a parody. Not exactly a situation where they're stealing from Marvel, but rather making fun of them in a loving way. Similar to how Hyperion over at Marvel is meant to be Superman. General Glory debuted in Justice League Europe issue 20 from 1990, which is ironic considering who he's meant to be. It is named Joe Jones, which is a name and a half. He was a soldier in World War II, he and his team were gassed by Nazis. And while they all died, he would be the only survivor, and was granted powers by Lady Liberty, and has to say the following quote to gain them. Lady Liberty, hear my plea, for the land of the brave and the home of the free. I'm Canadian, so I don't know what that means. But for my American audience, is that an actual thing, or did they make it up? I couldn't find it anywhere on the internet. Like, is that like a quote you guys say, or... I don't know, I'm not trying to offend you, I'm just generally curious. During his time as a hero in World War II, his agent would pull a Vought from the boys and make a comic book based off of him to make money, as well as make people feel safe in a time of destruction, and try to make some disbelieve in that he was not real, but instead turn him into a folklore. However, I don't really understand this because at this point in continuity, the JSA, Wonder Woman's mom, the Reaper, and even Doll Man should all be active superheroes at this point. Even if the JSA had yet to be formed, Ellen Scott, Jay Garrick, Donna Drake, and even Hawkman should have all been active heroes, who've been around years before the JSA was ever a thing. Therefore, I don't see how it's really hard to believe another superhero was active. General Glory would also have his own Red Skull, that being Evil Eye. However, while similar themes of limbs, Evil Eye is actually more similar to that of Artem Zola, both being evil mad scientists. And as Joe got older, he would deal with amnesia or dementia. It's not very clear, the comics labeled this as both amnesia and dementia at different points. But he would remember who he was when Guy Gardner runs into him, who was a fan of his comics, and would remind him who he is, and saying his oath again and reverting back to his younger self, in a similar vein of Billy Batson, but the reverse of it. Afterwards, Joe would help the JLA fight his old enemies, including Robotic Army and Evil Eye himself, but at the end of the day he would be arrested by the US government for supposed treason, that he himself can't recall. It would also be revealed the reasoning behind his dementia is because villains were trying to keep him from returning as a superhero. What? It's not really explained how they did this. They just did. They also were the ones who framed him. So they easily just beat the villains because they all admit this, and General Glory is set free. Which might sound like a good thing, but it turns out it's not, because General Glory doesn't really get a happy ending. He would join another JL team, that being the Quarterly, and while he would be a main member for the first few issues, he would revert back to his old self again and suffer a fatal heart attack. This was by the villain Overmaster. That is one way to go down. Wow! I understand that the character probably wasn't meant to stick around, but that is just brutal. He didn't even die as a hero, he just outright got murdered to show how powerful Overmaster was. Afterwards, like I said, there was another General Glory named Wallace. However, after only 4 issues, he too was killed off. Although General Glory would actually return in the Booster Gold comics, but it was because of Booster Gold traveling back to World War II, where he would fight alongside with General Glory. So General Glory was still dead in present time, as the two of them actually knew each other when General Glory was still alive. Which would be very confusing for General Glory when he actually meets Booster in present time later on, wondering, hey, haven't I seen this guy before? Regardless, he is still very much dead, but it is a nice reference to see him again, I guess. He is still in a very much parody role here, I would argue even more so. General Glory was absent in the New 52, but he did show up in the Rebirth comics and the Red Hood and the Outlaws comics, being part of an arc about him seeking out the Outlaws for help, being a government agent. However, his history of World War II, his powers, and Lady Liberty is kind of unclear if that is still canon or not. But he does at least survive this time around, with it ending with him going back undercover. And it would seem more or less like he is in a role that of Nick Fury rather than Captain America this time. General Glory, I think, when he was first introduced, came across as a pretty fun Captain America parody. While yes, he had some serious moments, he, for the most part, came across as perhaps just a loving way of mocking Captain America. But when he came back in the Red Hood comics, he no longer had that fun twist. Instead, he wasn't really a character but a placeholder. As really any character could have been the one to get the Outlaws to help him, because General Glory was not needed for that story at all. More or less just a reference to past canon. And that's it. Like always, please like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!